In this podcast, we bring together fascinating people from far and wide to discuss the highlights from their career. My name is Alex Lobert, and welcome to the best job I've ever had.
And I think it was an incredible experience, but also had some growing pains.
What you're describing is like LeBron James version of that.
I felt like I was a part of history at that company. Had I not had gone through those experiences, definitely would not be where I am today. I don't remember feeling like we had grown as big as we had until I left. And I was like, oh, wait, that was like legit, like a huge, like that was huge. I have zero regrets. To me, it's the best job I ever had.
Today on the show, my co-host Jared and I will be talking with Lauren Legette. I've known Lauren for a while now, and I've always been inspired by her impressive career. Lauren has worked at some of the most well-known companies in the world: Facebook, Google, and Uber. She currently is the chief of staff for global marketing at Google. Before joining Google, Lauren was the business lead for the vice president of product marketing at Facebook, as well as a senior product marketer there. Early in her career, she worked at the Food Network, Fast Company, and was at Uber when it was still a startup and not the global phenomenon that it is today. Lauren also founded Black Women to Watch. Black Women to Watch is a content platform committed to amplifying the voices and stories of Black women across industries. It's widely known that Lauren is pretty incredible. Her dynamic career has been recognized by Essence magazine, and she is also a member of the board of directors at the Cincinnati Country Day School. I'm excited to hear what Lauren's best job is. I suspect all these organizations have set quite a high bar. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're excited too. You've had such an impressive career. So first of all, just thank you for coming. But, obviously the title of the show is the best job I've ever had. So first question, Lauren, what is the best job you've ever had?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to have this conversation with both of you. Like the idea of like best job ever is like really hard for me to answer because I feel like every job throughout my career, there's like nuggets of different pieces of every job that I would absolutely say like this was the best moment to do X or this was the best moment where I learned Y. But if I'm not overly critical of the question and I just focus on like my gut reaction, I would totally say Uber, which I think would surprise a lot of people.
I love it. Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm a little surprised. I mean, you've worked at Facebook, you've worked at Google, started your own company, but Uber. Can you tell us a little bit about like what were you doing at Uber and like what actually sets it apart? Like why does it stand out for you as the best job?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about this, right, like it was 2014 when I joined Uber, which as hard as it is to believe was like kind of when people really didn't know what it was. Like major cities had it. And I think if you were like really into like the tech world or like really adventurous and you were totally into the gig economy, like you absolutely maybe had heard of it or read about it. But I think the average person like didn't really know what Uber was. So I left New York. I left working at the Food Network, which at the time my parents were like, what in the world are you doing? You're leaving the Food Network for this like no name company. What are you talking about? You want to work at a taxi company? Like, what are you saying? And it was sort of like, I took a chance. Like I had been working and, reading a lot about tech and this like booming industry, and Travis Kalanick is like literally everywhere. And still people don't really know what Uber's about. But I felt like I could take a chance. So I kind of took this job without really knowing a whole lot about like the future of the industry. Like I'm going to be completely honest. Like it wasn't like I took this and I was like, oh, it's pre-IPO, I can make a lot of money, or like, this is going to be the next thing. Like I truly just took a chance. I wanted to move to DC. I wanted to do a cool job. And this felt like a cool opportunity. So I took the job, and what's so funny, people are always surprised when I say this, but like at the time that I joined, I was hired to be a marketing manager for, at the time, the city of Pittsburgh. And I was based out of DC. The only thing I knew about the Pittsburgh is growing up, my dad was a huge Steelers fan, still is to this day. And that's about it. I didn't know anything else. And so I was kind of like, I'm surprised that they want me to work on the Pittsburgh market, but I'll be living in DC, which is ultimately where I wanted to be. And so I was a marketing manager. I was the first one at the time, and I helped us launch, Uber in Pittsburgh. And then slowly that expanded to launching Uber in Pennsylvania, then the Northeast. And it's sort of my remit kept getting bigger and bigger. And so, I think the reason why I said this was my first or my best job is because I think that's where I grew the most. And when I think about it in the context of like, what is my best? It's where I threw myself into the deep end. It's where I gained the skills. I absolutely don't think I would be where I am right now if I had not worked at Uber at that specific time. I also worked at a time, when I joined Uber, when you would like lose your phone in the car, or like, heaven forbid, you had a crazy night and you got sick and threw up, the Uber driver has to figure out how to get that cleaned up. When you write into Uber and like those people were responding to you, like that was us. We had to fill out, we call those tickets, and we had to fill out 50 tickets a week. So that was my first time ever, working through customer service. I'd never been exposed to like, how do you engage, not just with the customer who is often perceived as the rider, but for all intents and purposes, the driver was as well. It was the first time I'd ever done any like business development type of work. I did deals with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, it was always so funny. People would see me early 20s coming in, doing like mega deals on behalf of Uber, at the point where we got to be a pretty big name and people kind of knew what we were. They were always surprised that like the company was sending in this like, Black woman, young, like, I feel like it caught a lot of people off guard. So it was the first time that I felt like I learned so much and grew so much in the time that I was there. It was the first time that I think I really, truly did something that scared me. And as I said, I don't think I would be where I am today if I had not taken advantage of that opportunity.
I started my career in the Bay Area, so I had some early exposure to Uber. Like I kind of knew about Uber around 2014, but you're exactly right. Like I thought of it as a car service company, way out of my price range.
Yeah.
And something that I just
as a Black car service. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So it's like I knew of it, but man, the delta between that first, knowing it and then kind of realizing it was ubiquitous was like such a short amount of time. Did Uber start in Pittsburgh? Was that like their initial foray into like the Northeast?
Yeah, I mean, at the time that I started at Uber, all major cities had already sort of launched. And so we were thinking through like, how do we go from, we've tackled the major markets. Now it's trying to really tackle every single corner of the United States. And so Pittsburgh was sort of like one of the big cities in Pennsylvania. I was on the sort of what became the Pennsylvania team. But there were folks working on Baltimore, DC had already launched, but Baltimore had not. There were, the equivalent of that sort of everywhere. So, it was the first time I'd learned like really, truly what it meant to launch a product and everything that comes with it. It's not just like you just turn on the app and that's it. There's such a robust go-to-market process that, frankly, prior to that role, I had not even considered how that process works. But yeah, to your question, it was definitely something that was like hyper local at first and very quickly. I mean, we were literally like in Erie, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I don't know if you know enough about Pennsylvania. I certainly learned through that experience. And it's so funny, I meet people all the time and they're like, oh, I'm from, small town in Pennsylvania. I'm like, try me. I bet you I know. I've been to Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. I've been really everywhere. But yeah.
So obviously, when you went there, Uber was still pretty scrappy, pretty small. Like, do you think that the culture or the feeling of it, like being a startup, did that like influence like how much you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I think that I did not value the scrappiness as much. Certainly after, before that, I had come from a very like corporate environment. I worked in TV. The industry of television production, all that stuff is kind of like, it's been there for a while. It operates in the same capacity. There's not a whole lot of new and innovative things happening in terms of like the way that people work. And so, I'd gone from a place that was like super corporate, very buttoned up to like, hey, this is the problem we have to solve for. It's very ambiguous, and everyone's got to roll up their sleeves and kind of figure it out. And there wasn't really like an approval process. It was like, you want to try this? Like, sure, go for it, do it. And so, I appreciated it from the standpoint of, I think in the work that I do professionally today, I have some of that natural scrappiness. That's, I think, definitely a learned behavior that it certainly wasn't, I think I'm definitely type A. When you take the personality tests, I'm the person that's like very organized, detailed. I like all of the information. But I think working at Uber definitely put me outside of my comfort zone and pushed me to navigate ambiguity, which frankly, in the work that I do today is so critical.
So when you switched from the Food Network and you kind of pivoted into tech, that changed the arc of your career into kind of being in tech, it seems, based on, your resume, as it were. But after the Uber kind of practice, it seems like you've stayed in tech, but in kind of larger companies. Is that purposeful? Do you like the balance of the tech environment with that allows for some entrepreneurship, and then also is kind of the structures that you're referring to around, like, how do we make sure that people want to come to work every day?
It's a rich question. And to be honest, like, I think at Uber, it's where I developed my passion for working on products that ultimately become a utility. Like, if you think about Uber, right? I think a lot of times people thought initially that it was just like, oh, if you need a black car, if you want to like drop some money and show up in like a nice, really nice ride, like you can take an Uber. And then that eventually migrated into, okay, if you're having like a crazy night out with friends and you don't want to drink and drive, you should take an Uber. And then eventually it became like, oh no, there's so many more use cases. If I need to go to the airport, if I, need to go to a place where I don't want to have to worry about parking, if I don't have a car, it became much more of a utility rather than a luxury. And then again, if you think about Facebook, it's not just about social media and chatting with friends. For a lot of people, the platform is how they engage and stay connected to people throughout several different phases of their lives. I know several people that I don't have their phone numbers, but if I needed to get in touch with them, I could do that on social media. And, we hear, so many different stories about how the platform, speaking about Facebook and the entire, network within Facebook, or the company formerly known as Facebook, I should say, all of those things have empowered people to be entrepreneurs. That's how they make their money. That's how they sell their products through Facebook Marketplace, Instagram shopping, all of those things. It's become a utility. It's much more than just a means of chit-chatting with friends. Again, Google, the products and services become a critical, set of products that people use to run businesses, to engage with friends and family, to hold memories. There's just so many different things that it's not just a nice to have. These things have become critical to the way that people live their lives. And I'm really passionate about working on those types of products. And absolutely that fire and that passion was birthed at my time at Uber.
Let's talk about bosses a little bit. I know that, from my life, whether I really like my boss is one of the most predictive factors of, am I happy? I think data bears that out. So Uber, who is your boss? Were they great? You don't you can give me a John Doe kind of name if you want, but how is that?
Yeah. No, I will say that I've been really fortunate, not just at Uber, but just my entire career. I've had bosses that I really admire. Again, I choose jobs and opportunities based on, can I learn from the work that I'm doing, but also can I learn from the person who's leading me, who's hiring me, who I'm working with every day. And so knowing that early on, a lot of my decisions have been based on that. And I think, maybe it speaks to my ability to measure character pretty early on, but I think I've made a lot of really smart choices, knowing that and keeping that in mind. My manager at Uber was phenomenal. To be honest, gave me my first opportunity at being a manager, which was, I think, wow, overwhelming. I think, it sounds like you both have sort of been in the same experience where, we've worked at places where I think they put people in management positions really kind of go ahead, try it out. You're a manager. You've done really great at the work that you do, but now you have to be a manager. And I didn't know how to do that. There was no playbook. There was no like training session. There was no like, oh, go here and this is how you learn. And so as amazing as it was, I also continued to question my ability to be a manager because I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like I was doing what I liked as a manager. I also went through the very weird like transition period of like the people that I managed were previously my peers, which is also like that in and of itself is like a crazy transition. And I think you have to be coached effectively into that. But like I said, my manager had a lot of faith in me and gave me opportunities that I think, again, have contributed to who I am as a professional today. So incredibly grateful for her. And we stay in contact even today. I think also too, she came into Uber from a different industry, as did I. And so I think that there were a lot of similarities with like that transition and kind of navigating through. You know, I think back to like my experience applying for the role. I don't know that I would say I was the obvious candidate. I mean, of course, I don't know who else was applying for the role, but like I was coming from like a kind of totally different world in media and in publishing. Like it just wasn't like the obvious fit, at least, you know, in my opinion. And so she took a chance on me. Obviously, she saw something in the interview process, but I think from the very beginning, it was very clear that she was putting a lot of faith in me and saw a spark of my leadership capability and continued to help me develop that. So I am forever grateful for our relationship, and we still keep in contact to this day.
I mean, it sounds like you've had some awesome bosses, which, you know, I can echo Alex. I think probably the largest quotient of my, you know, happiness at a job is whether or not I feel that I'm, you know, being respected. People are giving me opportunity, that I feel like I'm being mentored. So I can totally relate to that. I guess my next question is, has, you know, around your, you know, clearly your bosses have been great. Have they been your key mentors along the way, or have you kind of broadened that scope to other people within the org that have kind of helped you, you know, grow and develop in that way?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have a very like kind of detailed perspective on that has evolved over time. And, you know, I think Alex, we both know Ty Ahmad Taylor. I'm going to shout him out because he's like one of the most amazing people.
Go Ty.
But he was a former boss that I had at Facebook. And he actually taught me this, and I've definitely adopted this over time. But everyone should have what's called like a personal board. And your personal board consists of people who are mentors, which kind of fulfill the traditional role of a mentor. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. Then you have advisors. And that's someone who operates in a similar capacity as a mentor, but is a little bit different in that they are not necessarily someone that you keep in contact on a regular basis. Perhaps it's like every couple of months. It's not as frequent as a mentor. And then you have someone who's like sort of advocating for you in spaces that you're not in. So perhaps like you have a close relationship with someone who is on the lookout for other opportunities, but perhaps they're at a company that you hope to get to. And they're sort of like keeping an eye out for you of like, oh, I know you want to come to this company. This role just opened up. I think you'd really great. I've been speaking about you to this colleague. I think you know, the two of you should connect over coffee. So I try to mirror that setup and make sure that my personal board consists of sort of one of each of those categories. So to answer your question, you know, if you think about my entirety of my personal board, it's not always the fact that my manager is my mentor. In most instances, I hope that they can operate in a mentor-like capacity,
Sure.
but it's not necessarily a default. I really focus on keeping that like personal board as full as possible and learning and evolving based on the relationships that I have with sort of everyone who kind of fits one of those three categories that I just described. But I am definitely intentional about making sure that I have folks that are in my same organization, in my same team, but also in other teams as well, to just make sure that I have an outlet. I mean, there's a lot of times where you're stressed or you don't know how to handle a situation, and you don't always want someone in your reporting line to be the go-to. I think that's natural and normal. And so being able to have someone, you know, in the company, perhaps in a different team or even outside of the company, but like knows the landscape. I think all of that is critical.
Absolutely. Very
Yeah.
interesting how structured that is, to be honest. I appreciate that. I may take that forward.
Yeah, Ty would be happy. Take it on.
You know what, the concept of personal board is it's great. Like that is such a good concept. I think everyone should know about having mentor sponsors and being pretty structured about it. All right. So you did leave Uber though. What made you leave?
Yeah, good question. Well, I'll say that I truly believe that we're at a point where, number one, I think people don't stay at jobs as long as they used to. And so I've always been intentional about wanting to gain as much experience as possible. You know, certainly I don't want to like stay here for a little bit and stay there for a little bit. So I stayed there for a while. And I think I was exposed to a lot of really amazing opportunities. I lived in Mexico City for a little bit and did marketing in Ciudad de Mexico. Got to practice my Spanish. I moved to Miami and worked and did some deals in South Florida, the Miami Marlins. I mean, I really got to flex a lot of skills and learned a lot. I also think that I reached a capacity where I didn't feel like I was learning new things. I was taking the things that I had learned and doing them in different cities or in different parts of the business, but I wasn't learning anything new. And so it just became an opportunity to look elsewhere. And, you know, I think at the time as well, like the company was going through a lot of transitions and changes. My team that I was on was going through a lot of transitions and changes. And I always say that like when companies or organizations or teams are going through significant change, it's always a good time for you to consider like, okay, do I want to, you know, ride the wave and work through this transition, or do I want to explore? And that's not a bad thing. It's not a reflection upon like you not agreeing with the changes. It's just change happens. And we know that to be true, especially in this, you know, in the space of tech, where I would say change happens more often than not. I try to always look at those moments of transition as an opportunity to explore, like, do I want to move on? And so I was open. I would say I wasn't actively looking, but I was open. And my friends will appreciate this story. I was sort of open and was kind of like allowing opportunities to come to me and not quite at the point of like, I was actively sending out my resume and, you know, having conversations, just kind of interview practice as we say. And a recruiter from Facebook reached out and I opened it on LinkedIn and literally had like this sick feeling in my stomach because I knew that if I interviewed and like got excited and got it, I was going to take it. And I had just moved to Miami maybe like 8 months prior and wasn't really looking to move. I was kind of like in a standard, you know, a comfortable position in Miami. Although I was open to other role opportunities, I wasn't looking to move to San Francisco, but the stars aligned. Facebook presented a really awesome opportunity, and it was time for me to spread my wings and to put the things that I had learned at Uber to the test. So, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, chapters end and new chapters begin, and so, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't say that, like, obviously that the company was going through, I think, publicly a very difficult time, and I think that they were going from, you know, being the startup to being this massive company, and it happened so quickly. You know, when you think about all of the moments and the experiences that happened during that time period, like I don't remember feeling like we had grown as big as we had until I left. And I was like, oh wait, we're like, that was like legit, like a huge, like that was huge. But when I started, I was like not aware because it wasn't. You know, I started and my dad was like, what company is this? He used to clip newspaper articles out of like the USA Today and like all these other newspapers, and he would mail them to me of like different instances of where they were talking about Uber. And it got to be so many articles that he had to stop sending it. So like even that progression of like, you know, a newspaper clipping here and there to like literally like envelopes full that he was mailing to me. So I think the world appreciated the value add that Uber had to offer. And we got really big, really fast. And it's a huge success story. But I think it's also a really good example of how, you know, when you run a business, like so many entrepreneurs are doing, how to be mindful of that growth and what that means, not only from a business perspective, but the internal culture perspective.
New goal for me is to have a job where my parents can clip out headlines of what I'm doing and eventually max that out. I think that's
it's such a cute
set a high
story. But I've told that story so many times, and it's so funny because, you know, my dad and I talk about it a lot. Like your parents obviously follow your career journey. And I remember, you know, that when I left New York and I sort of left what we all thought was like a really amazing opportunity. And I go to this like Uber. He's like, what is this? Like, it just blessed his heart. He was just so like dad about it, you know, and sending me the clips. But I love telling that story because I think it's like, it's a real, I mean, you can kind of see that in your mind. It's a real example of how like it just happened so fast. And I've never experienced that. And I think it was an incredible experience, but also had some growing pains.
It's a great story.
It really is. It reminds me though, like the only time that I've had clippings are in Kirksville, Missouri's newspaper from playing soccer when I was younger. And I'm like,
those are great
what
too, right?
What you're describing is like LeBron James version of that.
Oh, well, like, I mean, I didn't say that the articles had my name in them. I guess I should also say that like I had the really amazing opportunity of working on the self-driving technology, which launched in Pittsburgh and then eventually scaled to San Francisco. But again, like this really innovative opportunity of thinking through what the future could look like. I remember the first time I took a ride in the car before it was open to the public. And I remember just thinking like, I'm going to be able to tell my grandkids that like, they're going to be riding around in self-driving cars, like on a regular, like not a big deal. And I'm going to be like, I was in the first one. And they're going to be like, okay. And like, I do this every day, but it's still a really cool moment. I have the photos. I felt like I was a part of history at that company. I know a lot of people have maybe not so great things to say about the journey that they've been on. But I have zero regrets. To me, it's the best job I ever had.
Clearly the, you know, your transition from Uber and this kind of startup role to a more institutional tech companies like Facebook and Google. But it's clear you still have some kind of entrepreneurial itch. And so, you know, Alex and I would love, it maybe didn't land the best job I ever had moniker, but would love to hear about, you know, your story and what motivated you to start Black Women to Watch.
Well, it is my best job. I told you, I have so many. We could do like an episode on every job.
You only get one.
Yeah. No, the idea of a hierarchy isn't fair. But
I never play that game fairly. But like if someone says like, what's your favorite? I can't pick one. So this is my other best job I ever had. No, I think having worked in tech, I think having just been a Black woman in, you know, professional industries and corporate environments, the representation is always a struggle. And so I didn't start Black Women to Watch with the idea of it being a company or a business or like even something that anyone else would care about. It started because I was navigating this industry where I didn't see a whole lot of people at the top who looked like me. And I needed to ask questions. I needed advice on how to navigate certain situations. I needed insights on where to go, what to do, how to learn, how to get access to information. I needed someone who I could consult with. I started Black Women to Watch because I was having these amazing conversations and like hanging up the phone with people and literally like had written quotes that they had said. And I was like, I kept saying to myself, like, the world needs to hear what so-and-so just said because it was just like so amazing. And I also felt like there was not a place where people were talking about like the next generation of Black women who are, you know, on the rise to like disrupt this industry or disrupt this company or just whatever. And so I wanted to create a space where I was having these conversations organically. And I just wanted to share them. Or like if there was a Black woman in business or in entrepreneurship or whatever that I thought was inspiring or doing something really cool that like could be the next, you know, Uber, could be the next whatever, you know, I wanted people to know about it. And so it really just started with like, I think this is cool. I'm going to share it. I had this conversation. I'm going to post it. and I was like kind of sending it to friends. And I think COVID just gave me the space to recognize that like I needed to share these stories. And like, let's be clear, like there's so many different places where people are talking about diverse voices who are, doing amazing things across industries. Number one, I think that there's always room for continued conversations on that. But number two, I think the differentiator that Black Women to Watch offers is that we're really thinking about like, who's the next generation of these like really amazing women, and what can you learn from their journey, or how can you support their journey? And so, I think that when you think about, spaces that, industries are really thriving like tech, representation is continuously a conversation that is at the forefront of like, we need more diverse voices, not just in the company, at lower levels, but also at senior executive levels. And the more that I continue to grow in my career, the more that I want to showcase those stories and hopefully share my own. So, I started it again, like a hobby. I just loved these conversations, and it's kind of become something that I did not expect. I love the conversations. I love the commitment that the audience seems to have with the content. Like people, the other day we posted something and someone was like, oh my gosh, I love this page because I just feel like there's so many Black women who I don't know about. And like, that is like, makes me want to like, just cry, because it's the type of thing that I want people to hear and to say and to think. And yeah, I just want to be helpful in amplifying their voices and their stories. And I want to, hopefully give light to some of the really amazing things that are happening across the entire world, but, specifically to, and with Black women. So that's what we do. We have a podcast as well. So I know what you all are embarking on, and I wish you the very best of luck. I love this conversation, so I know you will be great. But I think it's, a lot of the lessons that I just talked about of like being scrappy. Like when I first started my podcast, I didn't have like a microphone. I didn't know what like what platforms to use. And I like had conversations with people, and I was like, okay, what do you use? What do I need to buy? Like, tell me, like, all the things. And so a lot of the skills and things that I just walked you through that I learned at Uber, like it's exactly showing up in the work that I do with Black Women to Watch. And so it's like this full circle moment. And I, the last thing I'll say is I the other day I interviewed someone who, well, I'll let you check out the episode to know who it was. But this person, I've been following their career for the better part of like the last 10 years. And they've been on this like amazing professional journey, and like quite honestly is like at the peak C-suite position at like one of the most important companies in tech and in the industry and just in the world. And it was such a full circle moment of like, I remember reading about her, and then I remember meeting her for the first time, and now like the culmination of like the two worlds have collided, and now she's a guest on my podcast. And so I don't know, that full circle moment just really made me feel like this entire journey was like such I don't know. I hope it inspires other people, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I just want to continue to share the stories and hopefully give voice to people who don't always get to share their story.
Incredible.
Yeah, you're doing such important work. So thank you. And we'll definitely link to this podcast episode in our show notes so that people can go find it.
Amazing.
All right. Last question we want to end with. Lauren, is there any piece of advice from your best job or from your career that you'd like to leave for people also trying to find their best job?
I would say number one, be intentional about making sure that when you take a job that you are inspired not only by the work, but by the people you work with and work for. Again, I've really been intentional about making sure that as much as I'm evaluating, an offer that I get from a company, I also want to talk to someone who works there that maybe wasn't a part of my interview loop to get the real scoop and the real deal of like what it's like to work there. I think, to the extent possible, asking to talk to someone who would report into the person that you also would report into to understand like what that relationship is like. That's been really impactful for me and something that I've learned along the way. And so I encourage people to consider doing that. And then I truly, I mean, yes, I have a difficult time kind of picking the best or my favorite. But I truly believe that like every job I've ever had, there's something about it that I would say is the best of X. Like it really is about taking little pieces of every experience and kind of like taking lessons learned. And then I guess the third and final thing I would say is, I feel like my best moments often happen when I put myself in scary situations. The first time that I became a chief of staff, like I remember someone said, I think you'd be really great at the chief of staff role. And I was like, huh, that's funny. And like, it wasn't that I doubted myself. It was just that like, I didn't think that that I was ready. It's not that I doubted my ability to do it. It's that I just didn't think that I was prepared yet. It was a goal that I definitely thought I could maybe aspire to, but I just didn't think I was ready. And so applying, I was scared. Interviewing, I was scared. Taking the job, I was scared. But again, I think for me, the moments where you feel a little bit nervous are when really magical things happen. And so I try to always align myself in positions that like scare me just a little bit. I think being afraid just a little bit is important. And I think it inspires some really magical things to happen. So I hope anyone listening would consider like, what can I do tomorrow that scares me just a little bit?
I think it's a great spot to end it on. So Lauren, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. This was awesome. I really appreciated the conversation, and it was incredible. Thanks again.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening. Follow our podcast to get the latest episodes of The Best Job I've Ever Had.